Hi, I'm John London. Welcome back to Thinking It Through, a twice-monthly podcast where I explore the reflections and connections that people make to their own personal history and personal geography. One of the most fantastic people and storytellers that I've gotten to know over the past few years is Sue, a native Minnesotan and today's guest on the podcast. I consider Sue a peer and a friend. Whether I've been with her at beautiful lake cabins in Minnesota, in apartments, concert halls, or restaurants on the streets of Manhattan, or just driving around with she and her friend Jim on the big island of Hawaii, Sue's ability to share a personal story or insight into most any topic is unique and very engaging. She can certainly command a narrative. Sue's remarkable career as a nurse and a primary player in establishing the first collegiate nursing programs in South Dakota and in central Minnesota is a most interesting and dramatic story. In our two-part podcast today, Sue traces her academic and professional roots back to a one-room schoolhouse and a rural Minnesota Scandinavian family that believed in getting things done that needed to be done. We spoke for several hours this summer in a screened-in boathouse at her beautiful home on Lake Coronis near Paynesville, Minnesota. What follows is a slightly edited two-part podcast sharing her story. Now, here's Sue. Sue, I'm on a lake. We're at your home. Before we get into your story, why don't you tell us a little bit about where we are right now and how this all came about?
We're sitting on the beautiful shores of Lake Coronis, and we're in a boathouse that was built by my great aunt and great uncle. And this property has been in my family since the late 1800s. My mother's grandfather, my great-grandfather, Hans Peterson, when they immigrated from Norway, Mo i Rana, Norway, way up by the Arctic Circle, he bought land here on the lake, then he used it kind of for water, so for summer pasture, but he loved the lake. And his parents, and he grew up, he used to fish the Lofoten Islands as a 12-year-old,
Okay.
and they were boat builders.
Wow.
So he looked for lake. I'm sure he missed the lakes from there. But anyway, my grandparents and my parents had lake property on the lake when we were growing up. So it just was always a place we were, and we'd run the woods and visit relatives all along the way. One time when I was 8 years old, I said to my great aunt, Louise, I said, I really love your place. If you ever sell it, would you let me know?
She was on this lake.
She had a little green cabin right here, too.
Okay.
So she had the green cabin, and they had this. So she owned this property. She said, okay, all right, I'll let you know. So flash forward to when I'm in Vermilion, South Dakota.
Do you want to tell us the years on that?
That would have been like
roughly
1984.
Okay.
Yeah, it would actually been 1984, 85. She said I was in a big political fight in Vermilion, and we can talk about that later.
Right.
But she sent me this letter, and it was in typical Peterson style that said, Dear Sue, I've decided to sell my lake property.
Right.
You asked me about it, and I remember I told you that I would let you know.
Right.
So this is the appraised price, and this is what I want.
Right.
And you have first choice, but I need to know by the end of the week.
Yeah, so stop what you're doing.
Stop what I'm doing. And I had 3 little kids, and I was in this big political battle, and I thought, what do I do?
Yeah.
But then I thought, well, you know, if I decide to buy it and I can't make the payments,
Right.
it's no worse than never having bought it in the first place. So I
Right.
decided to give it a try. And I've never regretted it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Because I love it here.
So you've been here since 86, 80?
I've owned this particular piece of land since 1985.
Okay.
But it used to have a little green cabin on it. And I would just come up in the summer because I lived in other places. You know,
Okay,
I lived in
right.
Vermilion, South Dakota,
Right.
and in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Right.
So I didn't come back here till 2000.
Right.
Yeah.
And the house that currently is on this property was built.
In like 2004.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And this is a wonderful place. And I've been here with Sue and her friend Jim and looked at the birds, listened to the birds. I saw some deer actually as I came in as well, just romping through the woods. It's really kind of a magical little place.
You see deer,
Yeah.
you see wild turkeys,
Yeah.
you see about any animal, or you hear them at night and you're not sure exactly what they are.
Right.
But it is a lot of natural beauty here.
And how far is this from where you were raised as a child?
Yeah.
How far are we from that?
I grew up on a farm about 5 miles south of here. Yeah, so it's so I'm not far from where I started.
Right, and your family is here. There's kind of a compound of your family here, right? Your brothers are
Yeah,
here.
as it's turned out, so different relatives have acquired these pieces of this same property from
Right.
our original great grandfather. So
Okay.
my one brother Rick is right next door.
Right.
A few houses down is my brother Tom and my uncle Robert and cousins. So it's kind of a nice opportunity because you can visit and be involved with your family, but you're not right with them every minute. So
Right.
you're visiting them, but then you have
Right.
your own place to go back to. So it's
And
nice.
it's got that what I always appreciate, the nice little buffer of trees
Yeah.
between the properties too, so it allows you to
Right.
have some privacy here.
Right.
And then you had children here, right, as well.
Yeah.
Did you raise children in the house? then?
I have 3 children,
Okay.
and we would come in the summers.
Okay.
And
In the little green cabin.
in the little green cabin, and we so we were kind of like roughing it because that
Right.
was old. That was built in the 30s during the Depression.
Did you have running water?
So it had running water,
Okay.
but it didn't. It was kind of falling apart.
Yeah.
I tried to save it. I wanted to save it because I loved it. It had, nice pine inside, but the roof was rotting and the
Yeah.
foundation was rotting. But one of the things in the summer, we didn't have a TV. I went low tech,
Mm-hmm.
and my
Right.
children always thought, "Really, we're not going to have a TV all summer?" I said, No TV. We'll find other things to do.
Oh my God.
And they would bring friends up,
Sure.
and they said, "You mean your mom doesn't let you have a TV in the summer?" And they said, "Nope." I said, "Nope. You can find other things to do," and they do.
Right.
They'd run around outside playing games and shooting
Right.
with, water pistols,
Sure.
and mainly swimming in the lake, doing all that. But that was one thing that they always surprised their friends is that we lived low tech when we'd come in the summer.
Tell me a little. Let's stay with your family a little bit. And I know that, well, first of all, how old are you?
Yeah. I
Currently.
am. I have to think back. I was born in 1951.
Right.
Yep. So
And
I
as
guess
was
I'm
I. Give me 5. I was born in
68.
51.
Yeah. We
Alright.
graduated in 69, and
Okay.
momentous year, wasn't it?
Oh, that was. I graduated 1 year later.
Okay. Yeah.
late.
We're celebrating our 50th class reunion now this fall, and it's going to high school class reunion.
Right.
It doesn't seem possible.
How many people graduated? in that class?
104.
And was that Painesville?
That was
High
Painesville High School. Yeah, Painesville.
The
High.
Painesville Pirates. What are
It was
you?
the Painesville Bulldogs,
Okay.
green and white.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And
But-
I was actually a cheerleader
Okay.
because I was there early enough that, there were no sports for women.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so it was
yeah,
before
yeah.
all the
Exactly.
titles. And so
Exactly.
the only, if you wanted to be in any kind of athletic activity, that was really your only choice.
Right.
Which
I-
seems impossible now, but that's how
Title
it was.
IX, yeah, was not around at that time.
Right.
Let's just back up briefly to, okay, so tell me a little bit about, you grew up 5 miles away. Tell me a little bit about your life as a child and your family life and what was important.
Interesting. So I really grew up in a very happy childhood, very happy family life. My mother and father had actually gone to the same rural school
Sweet.
that I went to, and then I went
Very
a one room schoolhouse. I went to the same one.
Wow.
Yep, pretty amazing. Yep, and
Multiple grade levels.
yeah, we had 1 through 6 in my grade, and so there were. When I went, I think there were like 24 to 30 students in the whole school,
Mm-hmm.
and there'd be, I'd go to. And kindergarten was one day. We'd just go and they'd let us go one day and see what it was going to be all about.
Right, right.
And then you'd start the next year.
So you kind of learn what school
You'd
was.
learn what school was.
That was
yeah.
like the preschool
Yeah.
thing
it's-
today,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. And there were 5 in my class when I started. But then in 6th grade, there was only 4 because one
Oh.
person did not progress to 6th grade.
Didn't make it. How any of those 5, did all 5 graduate from Painesville?
All 5 did graduate from from Painesville High
6 or
School. Yeah,
5
4.
or
Yeah.
That's great.
But I think, when I look back, I think it was a really good education.
yeah.
People say to me, if
Tell
I
me
tell
why.
them I went to a one-room country school, they say, "Oh, really? How old are you?"
Yeah,
Because it
exactly.
seems like something you read
Well,
in the
the-
books
yeah.
about Little House on the Prairie or
Exactly,
something.
exactly. Pause.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit
The
about
reason
the
I think
school.
it was
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
is so the way they designed it, that you'd have a row. Like you'd have 1st grade row, 2nd grade row, 3rd grade row, and then there'd be a table at the front.
Right.
And so you'd do your lesson up there. So when you were in first grade, you'd go up and do your lesson, and then you'd do it, and then you'd come back.
Right.
And then in second grade, you would be hearing the first grade's lesson again.
Right.
So it'd be reinforcing what you learned the year before.
That's excellent.
But you would also be hearing third grade what you were going to do next.
Sure.
Because it was there. You'd be working on your project, but you heard everything all the time.
That's funny. That's best practices by
it is,
definition.
isn't it?
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
So you'd reinforce, and then you'd do it yourself,
Right.
and then you'd reinforce it again.
Yeah.
And then the way the teacher designed it was, if you got done with your work, then you'd go help the younger kids. So then you'd tutor. So then you
Okay.
learned it again,
Right.
because you were
Right.
tutoring. And then everybody had a job.
Right.
It didn't matter how old you were. And they were like, we didn't have running water at this school.
Right.
So we'd have to pump water.
Oh, it was in the 1800s. How
Even
old are you?
even it was 30 below. And if you were a first grader and
Right.
that was your turn, you did it.
Right.
So you just said, well, this is what you do.
Right.
Everybody helps.
Did you have a chore board or something?
Yeah, there was
So-
like a design, and then
Right.
you one was get water, one was sweep floors, one was dust this, but everybody did everything. So girls
Sure.
did it, little kids did it. So
Sure.
you just all participated. You just expected to do it.
Uh-huh.
So I think it was a good education.
Did you have a number of teachers or one or
I
two
had
teachers?
one teacher for grade 1 through 5.
Wow.
That was Mrs. Danielson,
Awesome.
and she was very, very good. And then I had another teacher, Edna Olson, for my 6th grade year.
Uh-huh.
But then we'd go into town,
Right.
and that was a big deal
Right.
because you'd been in this kind of encapsulated one-room country schoolhouse with these kids. You knew everybody,
Sure.
and you knew their families, because the families, like once a year or once a semester, we'd do like a program. So then you'd have, like sing, and you'd have little stories, and you'd have
Sure.
pantomimes, but you kind of knew everybody in the community.
Right.
But then you'd go to the big school like Paynesville, where you didn't know everybody,
Right.
and there'd be that was a big transition. So
Oh,
going
yeah.
into 7th grade was big.
So you'd have to integrate somehow, or
Yeah.
or a culture,
yeah.
right? Or,
Yeah, and it was different because, of course, there was a bigger school, so you'd go to different classrooms. You
Right.
didn't just have obviously one
moving
room.
around.
Yeah,
That had to be
You move
terrifying
around.
initially.
Well,
Oh
it was
my
just
God.
it was a change,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, kids are always that transition.
Yeah,
6th grade
it made it
to,
even bigger, I think, because you
junior
had to
high.
ride a bus too.
Oh.
And the bus was quite amazing too, because it had different kids of different ages.
Sure.
So you'd be a little 7th grader, but you'd have 8th graders, 9th graders, 10th graders, 11th graders,
Right.
12th
So a
graders,
little
and you learn
extracurricular education.
you
going on
you
there.
learn fast.
Yes.
You learn fast
There's
riding a
all
bus.
kinds of things going on. Yeah.
Even in the country school, you learn fast.
Mhm.
You didn't
Right.
you were just exposed to so many things
Right.
earlier.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Right. Right. And over again. The school itself was called what? What was it?
It was called District 20.
Okay,
I
District
had
20.
District
Okay.
20, and we'd
Okay.
play like at recess. We'd play ball.
Mm-hmm.
You'd play softball or ball, so everybody'd be on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was on the team. The whole school played, so nobody was left out, and
Right.
we'd pick teams. And again, you got to participate in everything,
Right.
which was actually a plus, I think.
Did you like school?
I loved school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
I read every book in the library,
did you really?
every single one. Of course, there wasn't that many.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
but you're a voracious reader
Yeah.
when you're a
Yeah.
young kid.
Yeah.
Do you remember some of the titles? of
Yeah,
those
I
other
like
books?
the adventure ones. Look from Alaska and some of the ones like Nanook of the North and all of those.
Right.
Those are the ones I really
Right.
liked. Kind
Right.
of those adventure ones.
In high school, did you find yourself, because of your nursing experience in your professional life, did you find yourself gravitating to sciences?
I didn't plan to go into nursing
Okay.
at all.
Well,
No.
how-
My mom was a nurse.
All right.
My mother was a nurse, and I had never planned to go into nursing when I was in high school. But I took all the sciences, and I liked them. I took physics. I took the advanced program.
Right.
And I did, well in school too. But I had never planned to go into nursing. But luckily, I'd taken, sciences that I needed to do.
So you took the science track to get into college? or
Yeah,
something
I went to, and again, I went to Augsburg College.
Right.
And
How did that come about? Is that because of the church? Or
It
was
partly
connected to it,
is
or-
interesting. My grandfather went to Augsburg. My
Oh, okay.
father went to Augsburg. My
Ah.
uncle went to Augsburg. My siblings went to Augsburg. When we were growing up, when
Right.
I think back, there was a real strong interest and support in education,
Right.
and for women and men,
Right.
for girls and boys. It wasn't a. In some families, it was like the boys went to school, but the girls didn't. But when my father died, we found out that Ole J. Hendrickson, who was my dad's grandfather, was one of the founding members of the Board of Regents of Augsburg College. So he actually helped move it from Wisconsin to Minnesota, and he was on the Board of Regents.
Okay.
And so we just knew that Augsburg was kind of a thing,
Right.
and people just kind of went there.
Right.
And so, my parents had said to me, "You can go wherever you want to go," but it just seemed like it was so easy. It was in the cities, so it was kind of fun to get away, get
Right.
into the cities.
Right.
And I was interested in the choir. Music was always a very big part of my upbringing and growing up, and so I was interested in the Augsburg choir.
And was that the music was in church and school
Yeah,
for you?
yeah.
Growing
I
up?
was in church. My parents, my dad sang in a quartet. My mom sang in a sextet.
You mean just
in church?
professionally?
Yeah, in the church.
Oh, in the church.
Within the
Okay.
church.
Okay.
Yep. And I sang in the junior choir, and then I sang in the choir at church. And
In the
then
churches-
in the church,
what
it was
church is it?
Nordland Lutheran
Yeah,
Church.
Nordland.
The
And that's
little-
the one we went to, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, a little country church that was just celebrated its 150th anniversary.
Oof,
It
yeah.
started in 1868. And one of my great-great-grandparents was a founding member of that church.
Yes.
So when the Norwegian immigrants came over, they needed to put things together.
Yeah.
And one of the things they decided to do was, start a church.
Right. Right. But there you enjoyed singing.
Yeah.
And you enjoyed doing some of that at Augsburg as well.
Yeah,
Did
and
you?
when I was in high school, I also was in like band and choir, and that
Okay.
was the other advantage of being in a small school.
Mm-hmm.
You could do everything.
Right.
You didn't have to pick and choose.
Right.
That I want to do this, but somebody it's too big, so
Right.
I was able to be in both band and choir. So music, I think, has been a big part of my life.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then when you got into Augsburg, you also had to take, all the attended required courses and
Yep.
so on.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit outside of, now your mother must have been influential in you choosing nursing, but tell me a little bit about the decision to kind of pursue that as a major or as a focus point.
Okay, so there is actually a little story behind that.
Love to
so,
hear it. Yeah.
So I was at Augsburg for 2 years and singing in the choir and in cabaret and other smaller groups. I'm really enjoying that
Yeah.
and taking different. I would sign up for a different major every time, like elementary ed or biology, but nothing felt right.
Okay.
And so the summer of after my sophomore year at Augsburg, meanwhile, my high school boyfriend had broken up with me that year.
Okay.
And I was rather upset about it.
Yeah.
Because I thought this was the thing. We were
Yeah.
going to be
This is
together.
it for the rest of your
this is
life.
my
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
Yeah. And so I said, well, I think I should go backpacking in Europe. And so I said to a couple of girlfriends that I was living with, I said, I'm going to go backpacking in Europe for the summer. And they said, oh, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do it.
Okay.
So 4 of us.
In 71, 72?
This would have been 1971.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
My sister got married in May.
You were young.
Yeah.
Like 19 or 20.
Yeah,
Okay.
I turned 20 in Salzburg, Austria.
Ah.
On my birthday. I actually have spent 2 of my birthdays in Salzburg, Austria.
Oh, really?
20 and 26.
Okay.
Kind of interesting how that turned out. But, and my sister got married, and the day after her wedding, I was in her wedding, and then
Right.
I left, and the 4 of us, we drove to New York City, and we flew out of there because it was a cheaper flight.
Right.
Goofy planning, but
Right.
but then there were student tickets. You get student URL. You could get student
Right.
flight tickets, and we did. We went into England and all over Central Europe and into Spain, and there was a railway. We had a rail pass,
Okay. Sure.
but I wanted to go to Berlin,
Okay.
and the other 3 didn't. So
Okay.
I met this girl in Sweden, and we embarked to take a train to Berlin from Sweden. And her name was Linda, and I just met her. And what we didn't realize when we got on the train, we just followed people. So we didn't speak Swedish or German. But we got on this train, got on this big boat, and then people got off the train, so we got off the train, and the boat was going across, the water. So pretty soon we looked around, and no people were around anywhere. We thought they must have gone somewhere. We went back. They'd all gone back on this train So it was ferrying across. Then, so we got back on the train. And when the train got off the boat and landed, it was actually in East Germany.
Oh.
I know. Surprise. And we had gotten in, we had to get in this line, and we got in this line, and this guy stamped this thing and whatever. But when the train was going, all of a sudden when we got into East Germany, all these people got on. All these like people from Yugoslavia or immigrants, and they had chickens and turkeys, and there were so many people you couldn't even sit down. So like we stood up.
Okay.
But it was very scary because we looked out and there were men with guns pointing at us the whole way. Like we were in East Germany.
Right. How was it that your passport was even...
Well, this is what we didn't, and then we keep going really slow, and there's guns pointing at us all the way, and we get to Berlin, and it says Berlin. And so I thought, we're in Berlin, we need to get off of here.
Right.
So we got off the train, but we looked up, and there was a big train station, but there were like men walking along these walkways with guns pointing down at people. And we got out of there, and we looked around. It was all bombed out. It was East Berlin, not West Berlin. And there was bombed out buildings, and there were people with like horses. It looked like you'd gone back in time 40 years. And then we realized right away that this was wrong. We were not in the right place.
Train.
We're on the wrong side.
Right.
Probably the wrong train, but at least we got off on the wrong side of Berlin. So then we asked people, we kept saying West Berlin, and this guy brought us to this checkpoint, or this like door.
Sure.
So we went down the door, we stood in these lines,
Sure.
and all these people were trying to get through a checkpoint, but they were getting denied, so they were crying, and it was like something. And when we got off there, I thought, oh dear, what's going to happen here?
Yeah.
And the guy looked at it, he looked at our stamp, and he let me through.
Okay.
And then he let Linda through.
Okay. Yeah.
And oh my God, we got up, and it was like a totally different world. It was like West Berlin was like shiny and new buildings and fast paced. It was just like you're in this like really different world. But we talked to someone later, and what we had gotten when we were standing in line in the boat was a 24-hour visa.
Oh, okay.
And we didn't know what we'd gotten.
Just
we
to
just
travel across Germany.
Apparently
probably,
so,
right?
but we were within 30 minutes of that 24 hours by the time, because the train was going so slow.
Oh my God.
So I don't know. That was great. But anyway, so I'm in Berlin.
Right.
And Linda's in Berlin, and then she wants to go somewhere else. So I'm going to go meet my other friends, like in Austria. Right. And so I'm on this train by myself in a train, and then this other lady there, and she was a nurse, and she'd been a nurse for a long time. Okay. So she started telling me about what she had done and the nursing she'd done and what she was doing, and it just captivated me. And I thought, I think I'd like to do that. I think that's what I want to do.
Yeah. And
so when I got back at the end to the States and to Minnesota, I applied at the University of Minnesota School of Nursing because Augsburg did not have a School of Nursing at the time, or an opportunity. Right. But in retrospect, I think I was very lucky because I got accepted. And what I know now is you have to apply like at least a half year, if not a year in advance, to get accepted into a program. Okay. So the fact that I got accepted like in August to start in September
as a junior.
What it meant. I had to go at that time. The U was on quarters, and so I had to go an extra 2 quarters because of that. Sure. But I think somebody must have right ahead of me must have just pulled out, and they must have just said, "Oh, she's here. She liked my resume. I'll take
all
you."
The papers. Yeah,
but it was very fortunate,
right?
Because I'm wondering if that wouldn't have just happened like that,
right?
Would I have stuck with it,
right? Or chosen something else.
Or say, well, that door is locked, maybe. But that was very fortunate. But I've never regretted it. Because it was a good match for me.
Yeah.
It's been a good match.
Minnesota, did you live on campus then?
Well, I stayed at Augsburg. I went to Dr. Saturn.
Okay.
Who was our choral director.
I know
and
that,
I said, I'm really sad because I love singing in the choir and cabaret, but I want to go into nursing, and Augsburg doesn't have it. And he said, well, could you take a voice credit at Augsburg? And I said, yeah, I could do that. He said, well, if you do that, then you can stay in the choir and
Oh, really?
cabaret. So that's what I did.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So I got to have my cake and eat it too for a while.
That's great.
But I did that for a year. And I even went on choir tour with them.
Oh,
but I had to
That is
miss,
funny.
I had to miss like a
right.
week of school. And I realized that the next year I wasn't going to be able to maintain
Right.
that because I had to be, I had to be more devoted and I couldn't be gone because
Right.
the breaks weren't the same.
Right.
But I was very happy about that.
That's good.
That I didn't have to give up everything I liked.
And so you finished at Minnesota in 75, 74?
Yep, I finished in
74.
1974, March of 74.
Right, and then
Yeah.
so you were you were an RN at that point.
I had worked on Station 46 at the U as a student,
Okay.
and that was like a NICU, neonatal intensive care step down.
Okay.
And we saw babies from like birth to a year that were really sick out of like the 5-state area. They'd fly them in. And I enjoyed that a lot, but that's where I was working then. But I was more interested, I thought, in keeping kids well because they were so
Right.
sick when they came to us. So this new kind of thing showed up, or a new opportunity, which was called nurse practitioner.
Okay.
And they just had a program at the U called pediatric nurse practitioner. And I thought, that's what I'd like to do is keep kids well so they don't have to be in this
Right.
intensive care.
Right.
So I applied
Okay.
for the program,
Mm-hmm.
and they only accepted 12,
Mm-hmm.
and I got accepted. At the time, I was
Right.
married
Okay.
to my husband,
Right.
and his father, his grandfather had died, and he was in South Dakota, Vermilion, South. And so when we went there for the funeral,
Right.
then they found out that Chris, my ex-husband, was a guitarist, and they were looking for a part-time guitarist at the University of South Dakota in Vermilion.
Okay.
And so they kind of talked with him, and he decided to take the job.
Ah.
So then we moved to Vermilion, South Dakota.
Okay. Where's
again-
Vermilion, for people that don't know, where's Vermilion like in the state? Is it in the middle of the state?
It's absolutely straight south of Sioux Falls.
Okay.
And it's right on the corner of Iowa and Nebraska
Oh,
and
okay.
Vermilion. It's right in that
Sure.
little circle. It's on the Missouri. It's right on the Missouri River there.
Okay. Right.
6 hours. Depends on how you go and when you go.
So there you were. You were a nurse in Vermilion.
Yep.
What next?
Yeah. So then I'm thinking, well, I need to get a job.
Right.
And so I apply at the University Head of School of Nursing.
Okay.
So I applied there, and they accepted me.
Okay. Good.
So naturally, I thought I'd be teaching pediatrics because that's what my expertise was in.
Nice.
But when I got there, I found out I was teaching OB and taking students to OB and advanced ICU in McKinnon in Sioux Falls.
Oh wow.
I know.
That's a lot different.
I know,
Yeah.
it's very different. So
That's
it was
yeah.
but I liked what I was doing. As I was there that year, I really realized that I really wanted to do the nurse practitioner. So I
Right.
reapplied.
Tell me a little bit about what a nurse, by definition, what is a nurse practitioner?
Well, at that time, it was a very new concept. But what it was, where you could learn, it was kind of like advanced nursing practice.
Uh-huh.
So you would build on your nursing skills, and you could learn to do histories,
Okay.
and you would do physicals, and you would do like prescribe. You could do minor illnesses. So
Okay.
it's kind of like you could do more of the wellness-oriented visits,
Okay.
like for children
Okay.
under 18 or 21 years of age. So it was kind of like a beginning. You worked with the medical team, but you did some of the kinds of things that people ordinarily thought a doctor would be doing.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of a transitional
yeah,
thing. I
yeah.
mean, it's so much a part of
Yeah.
our life now that
Right.
I don't need to give it a
Right, but at the time it was
Right.
very much new concept, and people.
Well, it's a new concept for sure.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And all of a sudden, the doctors are having to
Yeah.
give up some of their, and some maybe gladly, some maybe not so gladly.
Yeah, it was
Right.
such a new concept.
Yes.
But that when I did eventually go back and get my nurse practitioner,
Right.
my pediatric nurse practitioner, when I came back, people had no idea. Like what are you doing? And I went to the South Dakota Board of Nursing, and I said, well, I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner. I'd like to be certified in the state. And they said, well, we don't know. We don't have it. It's so new. We don't even know. What do you recommend we do? And I said, well, why don't you take national certification? That would be easiest, and that's already a standard.
Right.
And they said, yeah, that's a good idea. So, that, there were so few of us there.
Right,
And,
right.
and luckily, I haven't told you how I got into, how I actually got into this, when this program actually came about. One of my instructors said you should take the national certifying exam.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, I should probably do that. And I
Okay.
did it. And that was a good thing.
Yeah.
Because that gave you that credential, and then you're kind of forging new ground when people
Right.
didn't even know what you're doing.
Right. And you kind of back map
Yeah.
from that credential to kind of
Yeah.
establish a program for others that would follow, possibly.
Right. Yeah. And then when I came back, actually what happened was, then I went to Europe again that summer
Why not?
with my husband,
Yes.
and he was studying guitar,
Yes.
and I got pregnant.
Okay.
And so when I came home, I remember going in. I kind of knew it, of course, but
Right.
I kind of went there, and I remember my obstetrician said, "Well, surely you're not going to go to graduate school now that you're pregnant."
Oh my.
I know.
Yeah,
And I
back
said,
in the
"Well,
day.
why? I know."
It's just
I
so-
said, "Well, why wouldn't I?" He
Right.
said, "Well, and I said, "Is there any reason I can, And I had another reason. My dad had been diagnosed with multiple myeloma,
Okay.
and he had been given very short time to live.
Okay.
And I thought, I need to be spending a little more time back in Minnesota with my family. So I kind of had a double reason, like,
Right.
and I also thought I had applied and been accepted to this program once before.
But
And I thought if I say I'm not coming again, they're
Right.
probably not going to admit me a third time.
But it didn't cross your mind. I mean, some people would cross their mind. Oh my gosh, I can't do this because I'm pregnant. But that didn't cross your mind.
No.
Yeah, and that probably, I mean, what do you trace that to? That kind of independence. That kind of I need to keep going with my profession.
That's
is
an
that-
interesting question. I just didn't think that was a barrier.
Right.
Just go for it. And I guess maybe growing up, that was kind of a heritage that I had learned from my family and my parents and my grandparents. Because I kind of grew up in Little Norway.
Okay.
When like I told you about the Peterson property here and
Right.
the Nordland Church, but a lot of people came from Mo i Rana, Norway, which is up by the Arctic Circle in
Right.
Norway, and they settled here together. So when I was growing up, I knew my great-grandparents, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, my
Right.
cousins. I'm basically related to half the people at Nordland Church, if not 2/3 of them. And
That's
so,
awesome.
but then I realized later in life that, so it was like Norway was transplanted here.
Right.
And so some of the values of,
Right.
social justice and
Right.
caring for your own community and
Right.
putting, I think that I really grew up a little bit more Nordic, even though I
Right.
grew up in Minnesota.
Right. Well, it just kind of goes against type, right? When we
Right.
kind of think, well, there's urban, and of course, urban
Right.
things are going to change quickly, and the norms and the mores and the gender roles are going to change more quickly than a rural, but not necessarily the case.
Right.
It depends on who you're talking with.
Yeah, and the Hendricksons,
Yeah.
like I mentioned, were very supportive of education and very supportive of their girls and the boys going to
Right.
school. So that was always a strong, like I never felt because I was a woman I couldn't do something.
Right.
Because that's how I was raised. But I did run on, as you can tell, you face things where people say, well, how could you do that?
Right. Right.
But I didn't face that growing up, so that I think that gave me the
Right.
say, well, go for it, and
Right.
if I can't do it, then we'll go to Plan B.
Did you find that there were barriers that you were just able to overcome because of your prowess as a thinker and a doer? You could just kind of outwork those barriers somehow?
I think sometimes maybe some of the successes I've had is because I kept an optimistic viewpoint.
Right.
Okay, this is a little setback, but okay, well, there's always, we'll find a different approach here.
Right.
Okay, this is a barrier here, but okay, but we could try this. So
Right.
I think having an optimistic view about, we can do this,
Right.
probably was helpful
Right.
in some of the more.
And then locate the ways to do it,
Right,
to
yeah.
solve the problems.
Yeah, and
Right.
I've always been fortunate. I've had mentors show up in
Okay.
my life.
Yeah.
They say that you need to have good mentors,
Yeah.
but I've always felt like mentors showed up. Like I didn't really seek them out.
Do you have?
They kind of found me.
Is there somebody early in your nursing career in South Dakota that would have been a mentor?
Well,
For you?
interestingly enough, most of my mentors have not been nurses.
Okay.
They've
Tell
kind of
me
been
more,
other.
yeah.
So I became a nurse practitioner,
Right.
went back to South Dakota,
Sure.
and one of the things I did then is I went around looking for a job, and I found a person, Stan Graven, who was setting up a new NICU nursery in Sioux Falls. He knew what I was, and he said, we want you to work with us, and it'll be half with us, setting up discharge planning for all the intensive care babies in South Dakota, and half of it will be with the medical school. And so there's a medical school at in Yankton and
Okay.
Vermilion.
Mm.
And what I did with them is it was a team of a pediatrician, myself, an obstetrician, and a resident, and we'd fly to the Indian reservations in South Dakota, and
okay.
we'd provide care
Right.
because they had the contract, and so
Right.
so I'd fly out, and I would see the well children, and the pediatrician would see the sick kids, and
Right.
then we'd go out to like Pine Ridge and Rosebud and Eagle Butte and fly in this little plane, and then
Right.
we'd buzz the hospital, and then
Right.
they'd send a car out to pick us up.
That would be the indicator
That would be the indicator that we're there,
yeah.
and then they'd send the car out to pick us up.
That's good.
But this was
Yeah.
a shock to me
Sure.
because the first time I drove in from this plane
Sure.
to the hospital in Pine
Yeah.
Ridge. I looked around and I said, I'm not in America.
Yeah.
I really honestly said, where am I? Because the poverty was so striking and it was so poor.
Right.
And then you'd walk through the waiting room at Pine Ridge Hospital, and I'd see kids in the waiting room that needed help, but they weren't the ones coming in. They were with somebody else.
Right.
And I saw very few totally well kids because there were so many issues. And that was a shock to me. And I said, I need to do something about this. So what needs to be done here?
Right.
But it was also a good opportunity for me because one of my areas of interest has always been working with the American Indian or the Native American
Right.
people because I feel like there's been so much injustice
Right.
in the history down there.
Right.
And because in South Dakota, like Pine Ridge and Rosebud and the different areas were so isolated, they still kept a lot of their traditions.
Sure.
And so I realize now that I was really fortunate in being involved in getting to know people at this time frame because they were a lot of still traditional beliefs and traditional
Are we in the
understandings.
middle 70s?
Yeah, and 80s, yeah.
80s?
Yeah,
In the 80s.
late 70s, 80s,
Okay.
yep. Because I remember one time I was at Pine Ridge, an elderly woman, a grandmother came to me and she said, we can forgive you for killing us and we can forgive you for taking our land. She said, it's really hard to forgive you for taking our children. And then I thought, I wonder what that's all about.
Yeah.
So then I had to go back and learn
Find out.
about the boarding schools.
Yes.
And so, you'd learn little things, and then I realized my education and understanding and knowledge was deficit. I mean,
Right.
I didn't know much about it.
Right.
I don't think anyone does.
Right.
So that was...
Did you have to learn? Oh, you did.
I had to learn,
Yeah.
fast forward,
Right.
there's stories, there's stuff in between here, but fast forward, I was a W.K. Kellogg Foundation Fellow,
Okay.
and I had the opportunity to write some grants. So I was writing this grant to increase the number of American Indian nurses that with the University of South Dakota and Pine Ridge, Ogallala, that we would get a Kellogg grant and try to increase the number of American Indian nurses on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And I'd been...
Would that mean bringing the school
Well,
to them?
it
or
was doing a partnership because fast forward, I'm now the chair at the University of South Dakota.
Okay.
But we've missed a few things in there, but
Absolutely.
and so I've written this grant and to partner so that we could give monies and support and tutoring and to increase the number of nurses that live there,
Right.
so the people that live there. And the Kellogg Foundation came out for a site visit. So I'd been writing this grant, and they kept
Right.
saying, you're asking for too much money. It's
Right.
1.2 million. And I said,
Right.
I know, but I need all this money because
Right.
it's a complex problem. There's not one solution here.
Right.
And so finally they're doing this site visit, and they wanted to talk to the community. And first of all, I didn't know if anybody'd show up because you never really know.
Right.
And you're
Is this
working with
like in
It's in a community
house,
building.
A community building on the reservation?
community bid on the reservation.
Okay.
The Kellogg Foundation people have flown in from Battle Creek to Rapid City. We're driving them down to Pine Ridge. We're arriving at this community center. And first of all, I looked, and there's a lot of people there. It's full. It's
Okay.
packed.
Okay.
And I think this is really good.
Yeah.
So we walk in, and the Kellogg person in charge makes a little spiel and says, we're here, and we'd like to hear from you, and what do you know, and what do you
Right.
think about this project? Silence. Dead silence. This whole room is packed. No one says a word.
Mm.
And I'm sitting there.
Mm.
I'd been around enough to know that silence was something you ran into a lot
Okay.
in the traditional Indian community,
Mhm.
but I just sat there and didn't say anything, but it was really hard not to. But I bet we sat for 2 minutes. And that's a long
That is a long time.
to
and
be
you
silent.
have these people
That have come all
up
this,
or down with the
yes, and
the
they
ground.
come all this way.
Right.
And we traveled, and I'd worked all this time, and I'm sitting there thinking. But finally, the oldest woman
Okay.
in the group stood
Okay.
up,
Mm.
and she said, we want to welcome you, we want to thank you for coming, and this is important to us because it's hard for us to recruit, health professionals here, and we need opportunities for our own
Right.
people. And after she spoke, then other people chimed in, and it got to be a very nice discussion. But
Right.
but it was it would have been improper for anyone in the room to speak in front of the oldest woman, because that was a tradition.
So when she was ready to speak,
It would not
she
have been
spoke.
respectful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was not ready to speak till she was ready to
Right.
speak, and no one was going to speak in front of her.
Exactly.
But I'll never forget it.
Right. No, that would have terrified me as an author of a grant like that, knowing this is all good stuff.
Yeah.
People.
I know, let's go. And I realize how cultural,
Sure.
we're not comfortable with silence.
Right.
We're not comfortable with people just sitting and
Right.
thinking. And that was a good example, but I did get the grant.
Yeah.
And we did end up,
Good.
increasing the number of nurses.
Good.
So it was a good thing. It ended up to be a good thing, but it was an experience in cultural diversity,
Right.
how different cultures view
Absolutely.
things.
Absolutely. That's an amazing story. I think that the Kellogg people learned some things too,
Yeah.
probably.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because there's always, you want to open up to diversity, but then you're always so used to doing things the way you've always done
Right.
it. So that,
Well, you said fast forward a couple times.
Right.
Did you want to go back and talk a little bit about some other things prior to that?
well, the way I
grant?
ended up being chair of the University of South Dakota School of Nursing.
Right.
There's kind of a story there.
Okay.
So I had come in and I'd done some work
Mm-hmm.
flying around the state and doing, well baby care, and child care, which I really enjoyed.
Right.
And then at church one day, a lady came to me. She said, "Would you apply to be chair of the nursing department at USD?" And I said, "Well, I don't think I'm qualified. I've taught there for 1 year.
Right.
I have 1 year of educational teaching experience." And I said, I don't have any administrative experience.
Right.
And but she said, "What? We need someone with a master's degree in nursing, and you have that. And we're having an accreditation visit, and if we don't have that credential, that's going to be tough for us to get it."
Right.
And I was actually working on my doctorate too.
Okay.
I was ABD. I had been working on my educational administrative doctorate, so
Okay.
I was working on that.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Right.
gave me the academic credential.
Right.
But I had no experience. And she
Right.
said, "Well, why don't you throw your hat into the ring?" And I said, "I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm pretty happy
Yeah.
with what I'm doing."
Right.
But I did have 3 small children, and traveling around was getting harder.
Right.
And I thought, well, I'm in Vermilion, and I'd be,
Right.
kind of in town. It was a small town. It wasn't
Sure.
a big town.
Sure.
Anyway, so in the final analysis, she kept prodding me. So I said, "Okay, I'll throw my hat into the
Right.
ring." And I did. And so I got it. They did interviews with me, and interviewed with the president, interviewed with the vice
Sure.
president, the dean, all of that.
Mhm.
But I noticed when I was doing my research that they'd cut the budget. They'd cut it about 30,000 the year
Yeah,
before. And so I
yeah.
said to the president,
Yeah.
I said, "I see that you've cut the budget. Is there something wrong here?
right.
Is there a reason that you're cutting it, or aren't you not supporting the program?" And he said, "Oh, no, we just had budget cuts in South Dakota, and, everybody had to take their hit. No, we fully support the program." And,
Right.
long story short, they offered me the job, and I took it.
Right.
which was a big deal because then in about 3 weeks we had this big accrediting team coming. So I had to jump
You had
in.
to get up to speed in a hurry.
I had to learn.
Well,
yeah, I had to learn. I
yeah.
had to learn about what was the program, but I learned
Right.
a lot. You know, I
Right.
learned the program. You know, about 85% of graduates stayed
Mm-hmm.
in South Dakota, and it had a good pass rate and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So going forward,
Mm-hmm.
we got full accreditation.
Okay.
But something was strange about that because it seemed like the president and the vice president and the dean were not that happy. And I thought,
Right.
you know, and the president had said to me, well, you know, why would I be hiring a new chair if I wasn't supporting the program? I wouldn't
Right.
be hiring a new chair.
And
That made sense to
Right.
me. I thought, yeah,
Right.
well, I would if they're not supporting it. But they didn't seem very happy
Hmm.
after they.
Why is that?
Yeah, well, because then we started hearing rumors. And you know, South Dakota is a very small state
Yes.
with very few people.
Yes.
And a faculty came back and she said, well, I heard at the cookie factory in Elk Point,
Right.
at the cookie factory in Elk
Exactly.
Point, a person said to P.K. Holmes, what are you planning to do next year? And she said, oh, well, I'm going to keep teaching for a while. They said, well, they're closing your program. They're closing the nursing program. And P.K. said, well, I don't think so. We've just been accredited.
Right.
But she came back and told me, she said, I heard the strangest thing, that they said they're closing the program. And I said, really? That's so odd. So I went to the
Right.
dean and I said,
Yeah.
you know, we're here in this room. He said, well, don't worry about it. No, don't even worry about it. And I said, okay. But then we heard more rumors
Right.
and more rumors.
Right.
And meanwhile, the Kellogg Foundation had decided somebody had written a grant to bring all the new chairs, all the chairs in the state to the
Okay.
Black Hills for a week of
Okay.
learning, you know, how to be a chair.
Right.
So I'd gone to that. And in that, you know, I'd learned many things, and also they gave us a mentor.
Okay.
And the mentor happened to be someone in agriculture out of South Dakota State,
Okay.
which was kind of our rival.
Okay.
And he called me up. He said, you know, I heard the strangest thing, that I was at a state meeting, and they said they're closing your nursing program. I said, really? And that seemed a little more credible.
Right.
Because it was
Right.
coming within the system.
Right.
And he said, you better check that out.
Right.
And so I went to the president
Right.
this time, and I said, you know,
Right.
we're hearing these rumors, and they're kind of substantial.
Right.
And he said, oh, don't worry about anything unless you hear it from me. No, that's not true. Don't worry about anything. And I said, you know, we're admitting people for next year.
Right.
We have a lot of non-traditional students.
Right.
People are giving up their jobs and moving here to go
Right.
to school. I said, if there's
Right.
any truth at all to these rumors, if there's any planning, we need to know.
Yeah.
So we're all involved in,
Right.
in what's going on here.
Right.
And basically said, no, don't worry about it. So we proceeded and proceeded. Yeah. Till we get to like March.
Okay.
This is now fast forward. Now we're
Right.
to March. So
Right.
this is my first year. We've been accredited. I'm
Right.
learning, and
Right.
we're hearing these rumors. We've admitted this group of students. We get to March, and the rumors are just getting really, really loud. And so I said, well, I need to talk to the president again. And my mentor said, you know, you better bring a piece of paper and a pencil and write down everything that is said, because you're in
Right.
jeopardy here, because
Right.
you know, you're the lowest administrator on the line.
Right.
And you know what, you have to be really clear with what's being said.
Right.
And also, PK and Sherry, these were faculty, they said, you need to go talk to, because we started to believe this was true.
Right.
You need to
The
go
end of the
talk to like
program.
you
Right.
need to talk to Frank Drew at the Hospital Association. You need to
Okay.
talk to the Nursing Home Association.
Right.
And they said, find out what they would do or what they would say if this was happening.
Right.
So I did. I went up and met with Frank Drew, and he said, you know, your program supplies our nurses, and hospitals are looking for nurses. We would be very, very upset if this were true.
Right.
So I went into this meeting with the president, and somebody had called the media. Okay, so the person who worked with him was married to somebody, so they were upset about it. So they had called the media. First of all, so I go to this meeting with the president,
Right.
and he said, I have really bad news for you. We're planning to close the nursing program. After 3 or 4 meetings with him where he said no. And I said, well, could you give me your reasons?
Right.
he said, well, I don't think, we don't need the nurses that are coming out. And I said, well, that's not true. Our profession goes through cycles, and right now we're entering a shortage.
Right.
And so, where will South Dakota get their nurses? And he
Right.
goes, that's not my problem.
Whoa.
And I said, that's not your
Whoa.
problem. But I said,
Right.
we're a public institution.
Right.
And I said, from a professional standpoint, I said,
Right.
we can't support your decision. He said, well, if you don't support the decision, you should fight me.
Oh. Okay.
And I said, what? And I wrote it down. I said, I need you to tell me that again.
Right.
If you don't support the decision, I'm directing you to fight me.
Right.
And he goes, yep, that's what I said. I said,
Right.
okay, well, I just want you to know that I think the faculty and us don't support the decision.
Right.
And we will be not wanting to agree on this.
Right.
And so that I left the meeting.
Right.
There was all these media like KELOLAND and TV stations and radio stations.
So this is going to go all over South Dakota.
All immediately.
Wherever,
Yeah. And they said, what did he tell you? And I said, you'll need to ask the president, because I wasn't going to go there.
Right.
And so then, of course, they asked him. He said he was closing it. But it created this huge
Right.
fervor.
Right.
And here I am,
In the middle.
new chair,
Right.
first job, just
Right.
learning how to be a chair, really.
Right.
And caught now in this dilemma, really.
Right.
And the faculty we went back. The faculty voted to fight it,
Mm-hmm.
and here I am, faculty, but I'm also
Right.
lowest level administrator. So I'm in a
Yeah.
tough spot.
Right.
Really.
Really a tough spot.
Yeah, really
Right.
a tough spot.
Right.
So what the faculty decided to do is it had to be approved by the Board of Regents,
Okay.
and they were meeting in like 2 weeks.
Okay.
And so the Board of Regents, so they said, well, let's have a hearing. Let's have people come and testify on our behalf
Right.
in front of the Board of Regents. So we need to pull in our support.
Right.
And so that's what we did. And so we had, Hospice Association,
Right.
Nursing Home Association,
Right.
Farmers Union, pretty much everybody.
Now you had never been really political
No.
before that,
No,
right?
no.
You're learning
This
as
was-
you go.
I was
right?
learning as I went. I had always been
Okay,
very
right.
conscientious on voting,
Right.
and I'd
Right.
always researched my own votes,
Right.
and I'd always done that.
Right. But
So
in terms of
no.
putting together, as was put to you, an argument
Right.
to fight,
No.
you had never
Nope.
organized
This
that.
was baptism by fire,
Wow.
really. And I told you about mentor showing up.
Right.
So about 5 days after this, I'm in my office at Vermilion, and I get this
Yes.
call. This gruff old voice on the phone. He goes, "What the hell is going on there down there at the university? Where's Burke gonna get their nurses if you don't have a program?"
Yeah.
And I
Who's
said,
that?
"Oh," I said, "that's what we're wondering too. We're concerned about that." He goes, "Well, you need help, and you need a lawyer, and I'm going to get you one." And he said, "When you go to the Board of Regent meetings, you're going to have a lawyer with you, and I'm paying for it."
Wow.
And he said, and I said, "Well, who is this?"
Right. Who
He
is
said,
that?
"This is Lou Lillibridge, and I'm upset about this." And
Wow.
he said, "I'll call you tomorrow." Hung
Wow.
up.
And hung up. Yeah.
So then I went and I
Yeah.
asked, I said, "I got
Whoa.
the strangest call from this person." But I said, "Who is this guy?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And P.K. Holmes goes, he's a big politician and a big Republican in the state of South Dakota, and
Right.
he owns a lot of banks,
Right.
and he's a wealthy guy, and he's well known
Right.
because he owns most of the banks in South Dakota.
But he thought it was ludicrous.
Yeah, he was, and he said,
yeah.
"I'm hiring your lawyer," and he was he had been the top politician. He'd been in the legislature in South Dakota for a long
Okay.
time, and he is actually there when they built the dams.
Okay.
He said one time he said to me, "Did I ever tell you about the time we built the dams on the Missouri?" So he was well,
Sure.
in there,
Sure.
and so.
Experienced guy.
Yeah,
Right.
so he did.
Wow.
So we put together a fact sheet, a
Right.
one-page fact sheet
Right.
about the benefits of the
Right.
program. And then we had this, then 2 weeks later, there was this hearing at the Board of Regents in Sioux Falls, and this lawyer came and sat by me that Lou Lillibridge had hired just so
Right.
somebody was there. And he said, "I'm not going to say a word, I'm just here to be here, just to be supportive." I think it was 78 people stood up to testify in support of the program. And then the regents voted to close it.
Wow.
Yes.
Then what?
Well, I was in shock. I thought,
Right.
this all this information,
Right.
you kind of feel
Now
like
we've done all this stuff.
data
We've done
and
this
all the
work.
information was there,
Yeah. Right.
and they voted to close it.
There's no argument against.
No, yep. So then that was the decision, which was shocking. But as I've learned as I've learned through this process, it's not always information that makes the political vote. You'd like to think it is,
Right.
but it isn't.
Right.
Votes are not always based on information,
Right.
which is a
Right.
sad thing to learn.
Okay.
So then, of course, what had happened was the Argus Leader, who was the big paper in Sioux Falls,
Okay.
they had started this thing called Day 1, Day 2, kind of like they did with the Iran when the hostages were.
Right.
They had said Day 1, Day 2, and they'd give something every day
It's a
update.
big story,
It was
yeah.
a big story to them,
yeah.
and they kind of took it on as the little people against the big people, like these
Okay.
poor little
Yeah.
program nurses, women, and this big president is being mean to them. So they
Right,
kind of took
right.
our side, which was
Okay.
fortunate.
Right.
But they'd keep doing that Day 1, Day 2, and then also so then Lou Lilbridge called me and said, well, you need to put a group together, and you need to say it, and you need to fight it. You need to go to the legislature, and you need to get this overturned. So I made it this far, and I'm going, what do I do? But I
Yeah.
thought, well, I really did believe it was the wrong decision,
Right.
professionally and for the public.
Right.
We set up a deal where we talked to every single graduate that was in the state, and we found out that we had one in all the counties. So we
Nice.
had, if they didn't know the legislator, we had them. We said, do you know someone who knows them? So we'd have individual personal people go talk. And then we
Right.
also had, like the Hospital Association, Nurse Home Association, were really upset because now the shortage is getting worse.
Right.
And so it's looking worse for the state. Like, where are they going to get their nurses?
Right.
And
Right.
Joe McFadden, who was the president, he kept
Okay.
saying, Sue, you're making up this shortage thing. And I said, I don't have the power. This is
Right.
on ABC and
Right.
CBS and
Right.
NBC. I don't have
Right.
the power to
Right.
make up
You're not
nursing
making
shortage.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
But it was kind of, its timing was good for us and bad for him because that started to be in the national and state news.
Okay.
So finally, it went. We went through that next year, and they had some hearings,
Right.
and they. Okay, I forgot this part. So I'm sitting there in like August in my office.
Right. Program's been cut.
The program's been cut. Well, we had 1 year so they didn't let us. They were letting us finish out
Right.
people. So half the people were gone. Some of the people were gone, but we were running at a very
Right.
low
Right.
number of people.
Right.
And kind of closing it down. We didn't
Sure.
we didn't admit that fall. I'm sitting in my office, and I get this call, and it says, "Will you hold for the governor?"
Mm.
And and it was Governor Bill Janklow.
I was going to say it was
Yeah.
Janklow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was.
It was Governor Bill, and he said, "Sue, I'm getting all these letters
Right.
about closing the nursing program," and he said, "What would you say if I said, maybe we need a program, but it can't be in Vermilion?" And I
Right.
said, "Well, I guess if you told me we need a nursing program, but it can't be in Vermilion," I said, "I guess it would have to be somewhere else." He said, "That's what I think. Would you come to a meeting with me tomorrow? I think we'll move the program to Dakota State,"
Ah.
which was the computer school.
Okay.
And so then of course I had to get approvals to
Right.
do that.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
but the governor is head of everybody,
Right.
even the president on the board of regents.
Right.
He was getting 200 letters a day. So we went to Sioux Falls and met with the head of Sioux Valley Hospital and the governor and me and Dakota State president, and they said, "We want you to put together budgets
Sure.
for moving it to Dakota State."
Sure.
I said, "Well, I can do this," but I said, "It's not the best place for the program, but if that's what you ask me to do, that's what I do."
Right.
So I put together these budgets.
Right.
Meanwhile, the Vermilion goes, "Wait, if you're going to have a program, why are you moving it?" So our legislator, Tim Johnson,
Okay.
people were saying to him, "Why are
Right.
you moving? Because it's
Right.
economically good for a community
Right.
to have a program."
Right. Right. So they come back.
Yeah. Yeah. And then other places, they said, "Well, if you're going to move the program, why don't you move it here? Why don't you
Right.
move it here?"
Exactly. Hands will go up.
So they're having these like hearings,
Right.
but meanwhile, Governor Janko puts it in his budget, his
Okay.
actual governor's budget the amount of money to start to move it to Dakota State.
Right.
And it was just a startup funds. It was just like $140,000.
Okay.
Which is like first year planning funds. And that's what he puts in his budget. They have these hearings.
Right.
But because everybody thinks it either should be at their place, or if not, why are we getting rid of an accredited program and starting up another program? It didn't make sense to people. So it didn't go anywhere. So then we get to the last, and then the session is over.
Right.
But it's the last day. This is another year out now. The last day in March to override vetoes, which was St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, 1986.
Okay.
And the night before, I get this call from Tom Shortbull, who is the Democratic representative from Pine Ridge.
Okay.
Which
Right.
And he said, this is really a bad idea. Where are we going to get our nurses? He said, I'd like to pull a small group together. Could you come tomorrow? The last day, he said, I'd like to submit a bill to keep the program open until we can study it.
Right.
And I said, well, okay, I will see if I have approval. And actually, I got approval to go. So Tim Johnson, who was our representative at the time, and Tom who was a Democrat, and Tom Shortbull, who was a Democrat from Pine Ridge, and another Republican one who was like from Centerville, who was really upset with McFadden about many things. I met with those three that morning in Pierre. But then P.K. Holmes said, you should bring some students with you too.
Right.
Warm bodies make a big difference.
Right.
And so about 10 students came with me up there.
Okay. Yeah.
This is the last day,
Right.
So what their plan was to submit a bill to keep it open just so we could study it.
Right.
And at first they were kind of mad at McFadden, so they said, let's write a bill that says we have to take money out of the USD and give it all back to the nursing program. And I said, that's a bad idea. If they do that, the rest of the university is going to hate us.
Right.
So that's not very good living conditions. So what the bill ended up to be was that the money that wasn't used in the governor's budget could then be keep us going at a minimum level until it could be studied and have a study committee.
Okay.
So that was the bill. So
keep breathing.
Keep breathing. Just cannot be totally dead. But we're almost dead because this is overriding the vetoes.
Exactly.
This
very
is
close.
Yeah, very close.
Very
And I remember our president sent a lobbyist to lobby against us. The USD. Yeah, it was just something. But I remember there were two guys that came with me, two students, and one of them's dad was head of the Alumni Association.
Okay.
And early in the morning, they went right up to this lobbyist and said, do you have approval from the Alumni Association to be lobbying against this?
Right.
And he said, well, no, they haven't voted. And they said, well, then you can't do it. You have to stop. And he did. They were smart, those students.
They were.
Their dad had called and said, we haven't given him approval.
Yeah, just went like that.
Yeah, exactly. He stopped. So anyway, so the first thing they had to do was vote to rescind all their rules.
Okay.
Which is very hard to do because there's all these rules about when you can submit a bill and when it can be here and how many committees have to hear it and all the things.
Final reading.
Exactly. But once you get rid of all your rules, anything can happen.
Okay.
So that was the first vote.
Okay.
And that succeeded. They suspended all the rules to
And
hear
once
this
that
bill.
was done,
Well, then I remember this one student going up to this elderly legislator from like Northwest, South Dakota. And she said, I want you to vote for this bill. And he said to her, honey, I don't really know what you're asking me to do, but since you're asking me to do it, I think I'll do it. This was some of the decision making. But she got it, Yeah. But anyway, so there's I had to go back a little bit too.
Right.
So in the end of the summer before this, my mentor, Lou Lillibridge, had said to me, I want you to come and meet someone. I want you to meet Harold C. Harold is the head of the Senate. He's the head of the Finance Committee. He's chair of the Finance Committee, and I'd like you to meet him. And I said, okay. So I drove out there. This was like about a 3.5 hour, 4 hour drive from Vermillion into Herrick, South
Okay.
Dakota, and this guy lived on a ranch.
Wow.
And I remember I drove up, and his wife was mowing the lawn. They were very elderly. He was in his 80s somewhere.
Okay.
And I remember I came up and I said, well, Lillibridge asked me to, stop by. Just, yep. I wanted you to stop by. And he goes,
Right.
yep, my granddaughter's going into nursing, and I think it's a good profession. And I
Right.
said, yeah, it's a good
It's a
profession.
great profession.
Yep. Well, and there was very little else in this conversation. It was
Right.
you didn't really ask me specifics. I didn't
Right.
really tell him anymore that I just said, well, Lou and I have been working, and
Right.
we think the program's important. But it was
Right.
a very, and after I left that conversation, I thought, I wonder what that was all about.
Right.
Because it just seemed like it was,
Long
yeah,
drive.
yeah,
Quickly figure that out.
yeah, exactly.
Right. Who is
But
this guy? Right.
now fast forward, so
Yeah.
so they've suspended their rules,
Right.
and once they've done that, this whole thing comes again. So some guy from Aberdeen stands up and said, well, I think we should move the program to Aberdeen.
Right.
And a guy from Dakota State said, no, we're going to move the program. That's what the governor wanted.
Right.
And somebody else got up and said, no, we should move it to Watertown.
Right. Right.
And then when people would be talking, Harold, who was very elderly, would slowly stand up. And he'd say something like,
Get out of his chair.
seems to me, if we're going to keep the program,
Right.
why don't we keep it right where it is?
Right.
And then everyone else, after he spoke, no one else would say anything. And then the
Okay.
discussion would go on for a while. And then Harold would stand up. He goes, seems to me
Right.
we should leave it right where it is. And what I realized was Harold C. was chair of the Appropriations Committee.
Ah.
Any legislator that
Right.
wanted any
Any
bill,
money,
any
yeah.
money attached to
Right.
any bill had to go through Harold's
Harold.
committee.
Right.
Nobody in that room was going to cross Harold.
He was just letting them know. Here's
Yep.
here's
That's
the
what he was.
line.
Yeah, that was the line. And then I realized why I had gone out
Yes.
to see him, because he just needed Lou.
Yes.
He needed to have that connection.
Yes.
Because
Are you
Lou.
legitimate? Do you,
Yeah.
Tell me what?
Yeah.
Who are you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I didn't realize it at the time,
Right.
but it was just shocking to see everybody. No one would cross him.
Right.
No one was going to cross him.
Right. Right.
And so
Couldn't do it.
yeah.
Right.
So at the end of the day, they passed the bill.
And
They
there you go.
passed the bill, and the president said this is the worst day for the university.
Oh my God.
And I said, "Under God, the people rule." That was what that was. Under God, the people rule, which is what was in the Argus Leader. I think
Oh
the
my
main.
gosh.
Yeah, that was the quote.
You
that
got
was
a
in it.
quote in there?
Yeah, I think it was the headline. I think it was the front page.
That entire skirmish then led to that program being at least put on life support, right, for another year.
Yeah, it went on life support, and
Right.
then there was a study committee.
Right.
And the study committee, then they held a study committee in Pierre. But the president was making it as hard as possible for us to continue. He was
Wow.
mad.
Wow.
He
Yeah,
was
had
really
lost.
angry.
He had
He had
lost.
lost. And so I said, well, we should have people, we should have people do this % time. He said, nope, you got to get rid of all, he made it difficult. And in fact, I had to go to the hospitals and say, can you just donate some faculty for us? And they said, sure, we'll do it. Because they were working with us now.
Right.
So it took a community effort. But anyway, they kept having the study
Wow.
committee in Pierre.
Right.
And so I'd get invited to come to the study committee.
Sure.
So then I saw this work, how this worked.
Yeah.
And then Sioux Falls said, well, we'd like an upward mobility program, And so then the committee said, well, Sue, can you write a budget? Like if you did an upward mobility program in Sioux Falls. I said, sure. So I submitted that. And then,
And that would be what again?
yeah,
I mean, I
so
know
it
what
there
means
was
in
to take
sociology.
LPMs to help them become
Okay.
an RN, upward
Okay.
mobility.
Got it.
And then Watertown said the same thing. You know what? If you're writing one for Sioux Falls, why don't you write one for Watertown? Because
Right.
we'd like one too. And they said, yeah, why don't you give us that? And that. So I wrote them a budget for that. Then a few weeks, maybe the next month, then Pierre said, we'd really like something here. We haven't had anything here. Do you think you could
Okay.
do an outreach program in Pierre? And
Okay.
and I said, well, it's possible. And so they said, well,
Right.
could you write could you write a budget for that? And I said, sure, I could do that. And then one time I came to the committee, and Frank Drew, who's head of the Hospice Association, said to me, well, today the committee is going to decide that they should give a program to South Dakota State, and it's going to be out in Rapid City. And I said, well, how do you know that? He said, oh, we decided that last night in the bar in Fort Pierre.
Oh, man.
I know. And I said, well, how couldn't it be like a joint program? Because, that's a pretty big community. That was kind of close to the...
Right.
And he said, well, I suppose it could be. And I said, well, I think it'd be better if we did it jointly with them. He said, okay, well, we'll see what we can do. So then that's what came out of that committee. So we wrote a joint proposal from South Dakota State and USD. So I go back to my dean and I said, I'm going to this study committee, and they keep asking me for budgets. And I'm giving them all these budgets. And I said, it's starting to count up. Right. And he said, well, don't worry about it. There's no money in the state. We'll never get all that money. Right. Don't even worry about it. I said, I'm just telling you, I think it's possible.
Right.
Because meanwhile, the nursing shortage has gotten worse.
Right.
And we have gained a lot of credibility because what we said turned out to be true.
Right.
And plus, after people did the research, they realized all these small rural communities that had hospitals, if they didn't have nurses, they couldn't operate.
Yeah.
And sometimes the hospital is the biggest entity in town that builds other things. And so we got to be, as the deeper people looked into it, they thought, this is really important.
Right.
We really do need this, and thank you for fighting for this because it's really needed.
Sometimes it costs money to take care of people.
Exactly. And so finally they're having the last meeting in Pierre, and I said, and they asked me to come, and the president said, no, you can't go. No, you can't. I don't want you going there anymore. You're not going.
A bunch of rabble rousers.
So then I notified them. I said, I'm sorry, I don't have approval. I don't have approval to go. And the next day, the president was fired. He was fired.
There you go.
He was fired.
And how?
I think they
fired him. The governor fired him. Who fired him?
I don't know. The regents fired him.
Okay.
I guess. And I guess I don't know. It was just very interesting. I think he just, I don't know. He had just crossed somebody.
Well,
there's all these power things going on.
He just dug in, and he was being irrational at some point.
He was dug in. He was being irrational, and he kind of was starting to make it personal. And I think that was just whatever. But actually, what ended up happening was they funded them all. So here I go from having no program or half a program, and the program almost gone.
Right.
But then I thought, now I had to start up a program in Sioux Falls, Watertown, Pierre, and Rapid City.
Right.
And that's a lot of work.
Right.
So then I thought,
budgets are all
yeah. But that was I was kind of baptized by fire in the political arena.
I would say so. I would say so. So that's going on all the time. And meanwhile, you've got another job to do. You're not just doing that.
Yeah. And I've got these 3 little kids. But what I learned was interesting. So then Tim Johnson, who had been our legislator, he decided to run for the one seat. South Dakota only has one congressional seat because there's less than 1 million people.
Right.
And when he did, he had helped. He had been very supportive the whole time. And so I wrote a letter to every nurse in the state of South Dakota. I didn't pay for it, but I wrote the letter, and I said, he has been helpful to us, and he stood by nursing, we should stand by him. And he got elected.
Yeah.
And so then he's in Washington, and I asked him if I could intern with him for like 10 days. I was just interested now. I've kind of gotten interested in the whole political arena.
And what works and how.
Right. Yeah, I'd kind of been learning. And so he did. He said, yeah. So I went and interned with him.
You weren't discouraged. You were, I get it. I mean, you must have done one of those. I kind of get it now.
Yeah, because I saw kind of how some of the inner workings and and what I learned was, legislators are people.
Right.
And sometimes we feel like they're too far away.
Right.
And we don't really let them know what we need, but they're really people. And if you can, and especially in South Dakota, that was true because there's so few people.
Right.
And you were never far away. from a legislator. And so if you don't tell them what you need, how can they possibly know and get it done?
Right. Now, that's one angle on the political end of things. What about on the caregiving piece that people usually associate with nursing and the lack of that, or your other piece, which is, well, it's married to the
Mm-hmm.
political piece, just how can you get caring people out to
Right.
the rural community? Is it primarily a funding issue that makes it difficult to get people out into rural communities?
It's a numbers of issues, and
What do you
so rural health care. One of the issues is funding,
Okay.
just money's out there. Another issue is like nursing students and medical students. They tend to like to go where they're comfortable. So if they've had
Right.
clinical experiences,
Right.
they're more likely to get a job there.
Right.
Another issue is just their lifestyle
Right.
and the people that they marry or the
Right.
people that they don't marry. Like
Right.
if you want to be somewhere but you married someone that absolutely won't go there.
Exactly.
So there's many facets to
Right.
getting help into rural
Winter.
areas. Yeah. And so that's why
Right.
with that grant with the Kellogg Foundation,
Right.
that I said, we need to support the people that are here,
Right.
because if you bring in a transplant, they're likely to leave. So we
Right.
need to build the capacity
Right.
in the community that you're at.
Right.
And then there isn't as many resources.
Right.
People don't have the money to, may not have the money to travel.
Right.
And those kinds of things. And then also with that grant, I wanted to bring in the cultural perspective, because if you have to be white, if you have to turn white to learn,
Right.
then it's hard to do that. That's double work. So can you weave in some cultural perspectives?
Right.
And that's true like in a rural community too. If you can bring in some of the rural issues,
Right.
it makes more
Respect
sense.
the culture.
Yeah.
Right. Part 2 continues Sue's story as she describes her continuing mission to bring nursing to the prairies of Minnesota and South Dakota.